You guys know that I use Apple products because they are the best at providing what it is I need in my devices. However, there's a few more things that Apple still sells that you really should avoid entirely at all costs. Let's discuss them. Okay, so the first Apple product that you should avoid at all costs, and unfortunately it's kind of sad because it's got one thing that really does matter, but kind of hard to justify for. Anywho, the M1 MacBook Pro. No, not the M1 Pro MacBook Pro or the M1 Max MacBook Pro, just the regular plain Jane M1 MacBook Pro that came out last year. You should avoid this at all costs, and you want to know why? Well, first of all, it's way too dang similar to the M1 MacBook Air. Two ports, same exact chip. Yes, you can. Yes, I know that the website says it comes with a 7-core GPU variant on the MacBook Air, but you can also get the same 8-core variant that the MacBook Pro has. So, not much of a difference there. And does the fan help? No, it doesn't at all. So, the performance metrics are just way too similar to each other, where it's really hard to justify spending another $300 for this whole thing. Looks like my Huskies are playing. I need to get them on camera more often. The M1 MacBook Pro is also missing out on some other important Pro features that the M1 Pro / M1 Max MacBook Pros actually have. For example, 1080p webcam, completely absent on this model. That's kind of a Pro feature you might want to have. Better display support. Yep, what are you two doing? I have no idea what they're fighting over. Better display support. The M1 Pro MacBook Pros and the M1 Max as well. I mean, the M1 Pro has support for 2 external displays. Let me rephrase that. 2 6K external displays. So maybe you can, I don't know, maybe attach possibly 3 4Ks. I mean, they did say that it is Thunderbolt and it's full on Thunderbolt this time. So maybe we can get 4K displays, but they're not specific. They have not been specific with that. Anywho, yeah, with the M1 Pro, you can attach 2 6K displays. The M1 Max, you can attach 3 6K displays plus a 4K. And what about the M1? A single 6K display. Display support is another reason why you might not want to get this, especially if you dock this all the time. So, doesn't even have that going for it. Then there's other issues. So there's a $300 price difference between this and the MacBook Air. So what is the actual things you're getting with this $300? Well, nearly useless fan because the performance is way too dang similar. A slightly brighter display, though keep in mind the even more Pro MacBook Pros actually have even brighter displays than that since they're HDR. And slightly better battery. I mean, it's 20 hours compared to the MacBook Air. That is rated at 18, but $300 for 2 extra hours of battery, a useless fan, and slightly brighter display. Kind of hard to justify. There is one Pro thing about this MacBook Pro, and sadly, it's the one Pro thing that really matters to me. It's the touch bar. It's the only one with the touch bar, and it's sad that I cannot recommend this because it's too similar to the MacBook Air, and unfortunately, stupidly, people hate this touch bar for some reason, and I don't understand why. Alright, what's the next Mac that you should avoid entirely? Well, actually technically 3 of them. It's any Intel desktop Mac. Actually, it's all the rest of the Intel Macs. The only Intel Macs left are desktops. All the mobile Macs have been transitioned to Apple Silicon already. So yeah, any Mac with Intel at this point. I mean, they were fine at first when we got the M1 transition because the M1 is supposed to be the consumer grade chip, not the professional grade chip. Except now that we got the professional grade chip, plus supposedly we're getting a new iMac in March, and this iMac is supposed to be the larger 27-inch, not 32-inch. Why, Apple? We love bigger displays! Give us bigger displays! Is that really hard to ask for? 27-inch iMac is also going to get updated to Apple Silicon as well, which rumors on that make it seem like, yeah, do not buy the current 27-inch, especially since the current 27-inch hasn't been redesigned in nearly 10 years. The Mac Pro, you know what? You're better off just waiting next year for the 40 CPU core, 128 GPU core Ooh, this thing's gonna be an absolute beast of a machine. Yeah, the Mac Pro, don't get the current Intel one. Just wait for the new Apple Silicon one. And then the last desktop Mac, the Mac Mini, yeah, just buy the M1 Mac Mini. The Intel Mac Mini is not a good one right now. Okay, so those are actually all of the Macs. Those are the Macs that you want to avoid at all costs right now. But there's more than just Macs that you need to avoid at all costs. There's an iPad that you also have to avoid at all costs. The iPad Air. This actually has a longer list of issues compared to the Macs, and that's because, well, somehow, yeah, it's hard to buy. Here's the list of issues. Older chip for an extra $100 compared to the iPad Mini. The iPad Mini has the A15 Bionic. The iPad Air has the A14 Bionic. iPad Mini is $500. iPad Air is $600. Where's the logic in this? The iPad Air also has a worse front camera. Why does this matter? Well, a lot of what we do with tablets is often video calls. So you want a good camera, and okay, it's not trash quality, but there's one very important feature that it's actually missing. Center stage. Yep, it is the only iPad that does not have center stage. Even the budget iPad, budget $320 iPad has center stage. That's embarrassing. It's also way too similar to the 11-inch iPad Pro, and I know that's got the crazy stupid performance of the M1 and 120 Hertz. Those are things that you might not necessarily care about, but the display size is nearly the same, other than the Pro has a generally better display overall. Cameras are also better on the Pro, and I know there's a $200 price difference between, so why spend the extra $200? You don't have to spend an extra $200 for an iPad Pro. You can get them on certified refurbished for about the same price as an iPad Air. Yeah, I think I'll take the Pro. This is a personal complaint that I have, and that's just because I have a skin condition known as eczema, where I basically don't produce enough skin, and because of that, I actually am missing a couple fingerprints. I joke around saying I have 0 fingerprints. That's actually not true. I'm just missing a few of them, particularly on my thumb. Due to this issue, that makes fingerprint scanners very useless for me. Now, I have been lucky on iPads and Macs so far. I have tried out a few iPad fingerprint scanners. I have been lucky. They've done a better job at remembering my fingerprints than some others that I've tested. Same with the Macs. I've never actually owned a Touch ID MacBook before, but I've played with the demo units at Best Buy. However, whenever it comes to Touch ID on an iPhone, I can never even get my fingerprint registered. I can't even get past that first step of registration. It refuses to even recognize that I have a fingerprint, which to me is bananas, because the iPads, most of them will recognize my fingerprint. I have yet to find a Mac that actually doesn't recognize it. Never have I ever gotten a single iPhone to recognize my fingerprint, which makes me really nervous if Apple decides to switch technologies or whatever. I don't know why it's only the iPhones. It's only the iPhones. iPads and Macs, it'll still recognize me, but I have yet to test out the Touch ID sensor on the iPad Air, and that's because, stupidly, my local Walmart, they have it on display, but they blocked off the fingerprint scanner. Whose brilliant idea was it to do that? But yeah, Pros have Face ID, and Face ID to me is totally worth it. And if you're worried about, well, what if I'm wearing a mask and I can't use Face ID? You're at home. Is it really that big of a deal? And then the last thing that is supposed to be a selling point for the iPad Air, but I've actually just realized, no, it's not really that good. The colors. Yes, I like how there are color options. I love color options, but the problem with these colors is they're so muted and so faded. It's as if they're just barely that color. The sky blue that my Walmart has on display, it looks more like a slightly different silver, to be honest. And considering that all the other colors are consistently faded to whatever the color you see first, that means the green is going to be so pale it's barely going to look green, and the rose gold or whatever, it's going to look pink. I do not like pink stuff. I don't know why they call it rose gold, because it's not rose gold, it's pink. So yeah, the colors aren't even a good reason to buy it, because they don't stand out. It seems like they're not even proud to be colorful, which is a real shame, to be honest. Alright, that's the iPad, and that's the only iPad that I highly recommend against buying. So, enough of the Macs and the iPads, time for the iPhones. Or, there's just one iPhone that I cannot recommend to anyone right now, and it's the 12 mini. And the reason for this is because the 12 mini doesn't exactly have the greatest battery life. The 13 mini has actually fixed this problem. So if you want a mini phone, don't save $100 and get the 12 mini, because you're essentially going to shoot yourself in the foot with that battery. It's too short. So get the 13, and that's really the only reason why I can't recommend the 12 mini. Battery life is important. You want it to last you throughout the day, unless you only use your phone for quite literally text messages and phone calls and nothing else. That might be the only way you'll actually save battery. But of course, we do more with our phones than just texting and phone calls. So yeah, I can't recommend the 12 mini. Okay, there's two more Apple products I have left to recommend against buying, and the first of those two is the Apple Watch Series 3. Do not buy this watch. There is zero reason to buy this watch. There are 0 pros, 100% cons to buy this watch. It's not bad. It was really good at the time it came out, but we've improved so dramatically that it's really not worth buying this watch. Also, if you compare it to the Series 7 today, those bezels are ridiculously thick. My aunt has the Series 3, and those bezels are ridiculously thick. I have a hard time actually looking at it. So yeah, don't get that watch. It's not a good watch anymore. It was good for the day. It's not the day anymore. So don't buy that watch. But it's got the cheapest price. What if I want to buy the cheapest watch they sell? Honestly, the Apple Watch SE is a much better value. I know it's $80 more expensive, but to be honest, it is completely worth that $80. Spend the extra $80 and get yourself a better watch than the Series 3. And the last product that I completely recommend against buying, and surprisingly enough, I actually have one sitting on my alarm clock over there, the iPod Touch. Why not buy the iPod Touch? Well, it's got a tiny screen, especially considering that all the iPhones have larger screens than that. It's got a tiny battery because it's super thin. In fact, my sister has an iPod Touch, and did it even last the year? No, it's barely lasting 2 years. She got it for Christmas, and it's barely lasting her 2 years. The battery life has it's super short, but it has degraded so much because she uses that thing so much. Very tiny, and now she practically has to plug it in like every 20 to 30 minutes. Do not buy that for the battery life because it is non-existent. It's also got an older processor. It's the same one as the iPhone 7's processor, except downclocked. So even then, not only is it an older chip, but it's a worse performing older chip. The camera quality on it is complete garbage. In fact, this is why I stopped filming with my iPod altogether. It's because it's so noisy and grainy and it looks so bad. And to be honest, you're really better off just getting an iPhone, because first of all, this is old hardware that they're selling for $200. I mean, $200, it's a cheap Apple product you can get for the kids, but honestly, if you want to get an Apple product for the kids, get them an iPad. Just get them a budget iPad. It's a much better device than the iPod Touch. Alright, and that is my list of Apple products that you should avoid at all costs. Please do not consider buying them just because I recommended against them, because you'll actually regret it. I really struggle to recommend these things to anybody. So these products were okay, maybe except the 12 mini, because that still had questionable battery life at the time. Despite that, most of these products were good at the time when they were released. Time has gone by and their time is up, so don't buy them anymore. Alright, thank you for watching. Do me a favor and interact with the stuff below. My name is DeWolf, Random Alpha, signing out.